Let the rebuild begin. After what feels like 100 years of mediocrity, the Washington Wizards have finally decided to blow things up in a major way. They lost 8 players this offseason, including a few key starters and their franchise player, and brought in a cast of young, somewhat unproven players that are hoping to start fresh in DC. It is a new era in Washington, one that hopefully leads to something much more promising than what they were before. But how does it look like in year one? First, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more NBA content. The season is almost here, and we have tons of great NBA videos coming your way to get you prepped for what should be an awesome season. Oh, it must feel good to be a Wizards fan right now, and you might wonder why. They just traded their longtime franchise player in Bradley Beal. They moved off of Kristaps Porzingis and recently acquired Monte Morris in the process, and are now a completely different team than they were last season and for the past few seasons. And thank God, since 2018, the Wizards have won 30-ish games consistently, except for 1 year where they won 25. They have habitually been a middle-of-the-pack Eastern Conference team, never too good to be a playoff team, never too bad enough to land top-tier lottery talent. Even in their heyday of John Wall and Bradley Beal, while they had some fun teams and even put the fear of God in a few playoff teams, still weren't a team that had any hopes of being a legitimate title contender. Washington, for far too long, was satisfied with being just meh. But now, they want to be bad. Really bad, in hopes that in the long run, that pays off for them to eventually, one day, field, dare I say, a contender. We can go through the warts of rebuilding, how long and enduring it tends to be. I mean, just ask Pistons and Magic fans, but at the very least, you are not doomed to continue running on the treadmill of mediocrity anymore, and that, my Wizards fans, is a massive win. And honestly, maybe I'm overselling how bad this Wizards team is going to be this season, especially because they have some young, intriguing talent, a pretty good head coach in Wes Unseld Jr. at the helm of it all, and they have now a boatload of picks ready to move when the next phase of the franchise begins. But right now, this iteration of the franchise starts in the backcourt with the 2 players they traded for this summer, Jordan Poole and Tyus Jones. In Poole, the Wizards have an intriguing and dynamic scoring guard who was pivotal for the Warriors in their 2022 title run. He can handle the rock, he explodes to the basket like he's shot out of a cannon, he's a pretty good passer when he wants to be, and ultimately, he's not afraid to take, make, and miss shots. Poole has his flaws, in that there's no question. He is a pretty lackadaisical defender who is not very good at navigating around screens and falls asleep off of the ball pretty consistently. Despite being a good passer, he makes tons of poor decisions, and that was inevitably what made him suffer last season in Golden State, unable to mesh in the Warriors' motion style of offense. And despite having the ability to score and shoot, Poole had a down year as a scorer, going from 37% in his championship season to just 33% last year behind the arc, despite his overall scoring and usage going up. Look, there's a few ways to look at the Poole situation as it pertains to the Wizards. He's going to have free reign to develop in Washington, being one of the focal points of an offense that will be centered around him, Jones, and Kyle Kuzma, and ultimately, there's a chance with the added usage and some much-needed development, he has all-star potential in this league. And at the worst, Poole is who he is, which is a spark plug who can score in boatloads, but needs to be reined in terms of usage and workload so it doesn't negatively impact the rest of the team. Essentially, he can either become Gilbert Arenas, another Warrior turned Wizard, funny enough, who was electric as a scorer and creator, or he can become Jamal Crawford, and the most realistic scenario is honestly that he'll end up something in between. Personally, I still believe in Poole, despite him having a pretty rough year in Golden State, and I think he's going to be given ample room to try, fail, and succeed in Washington. And I wouldn't be surprised if someday he explodes onto the scene and becomes an all-star level player. He's just so dynamic. I feel confident in betting on that. As for his backcourt mate Jones, he's probably the polar opposite of what Poole is. He is meticulous, he plays mistake-free basketball, and was one of the best floor generals and backup point guards in the league in his time in Memphis with the Grizzlies. He led the league in assist-to-turnover ratio last season and probably had the best offensive season of his career last year, knocking down 37% of his threes on decent volume. The idea is that now, as the Wizards' primary point guard and starter, Jones will be even more aggressive offensively as a scorer. He can put up even better numbers, and despite his size limitations, can do enough to be consistent on the defensive end. there's serious potential for him to explode onto the scene this year with the added usage and larger role. He's a free agent this summer, so I'm not sure how much he plays into the Wizards' long-term plans, but there is serious potential for Poole and Jones to be the Wizards' backcourt, at least for the foreseeable future. And that tandem, one who is methodical and precise, and another that is explosive and haphazard, I think it could prove to be fun. At the very least, even if they don't win many games, I think the Wizards can put out an entertaining offensive brand of basketball, especially with them inking Kuzma to a long-term 4-year, $102 million deal to stay in Washington. Kuzma has been awesome in a Wizards uniform. He's had the best seasons of his career. He really came into his own as a scorer and shooter. He's a great rebounder for his size, is a good team defender, and ultimately, he's one of the best all-around wings for that value contract. He makes for an insanely good trade chip for Washington to use at a later date because he could slot into virtually any contending team and be the difference maker. But for now, Kuzma is going to be one of the main offensive engines for this Wizards team, and with him, Poole, and Jones, they have a lot of firepower. The Wizards also re-signed Taj Gibson to shore up their front court depth behind Kuzma and big man Daniel Gafford, and also to add another veteran presence to a fairly young locker room. To round off their list of off-season additions either via trade or through free agency, the Wizards added Landry Shamet, Ryan Rollins, Eugene Amoriu, Danilo Gallinari, Patrick Baldwin, and Mike Muscala. Now, these are just some of the scraps left over from all of the transactional hoopla for the Wizards this summer, and inevitably, some of these guys are going to get moved even as soon as this season. There were already reports that the Wizards are looking to move off of DeLon Wright, Shamet, and Gallinari at some point this season in exchange for draft capital, and I could see that being the case for all three of those guys. But their most intriguing addition, who is here to stay long-term, has to be who they selected 7th overall in the 2023 draft, Bilal Coulibaly. The 6'6" wing out of France rose up the draft boards quickly during the pre-draft process, and it was purely because of his tantalizing skills at his age. He's long with a 7'2" wingspan and is an incredible defender. He has quick feet, is great positionally, and knows how to use his length against offensive players with pokeouts, digs, etc. He's athletic, but not just jump out of the gym athletic, it's functional. He's quick, he's agile, he can jump from spot to spot on the floor, he has great anticipation, and all the tools of becoming an elite defender, and quickly. Because of his frame and athleticism, he's great at getting downhill on offense. He needs to improve as a shooter, and while he's showed flashes of being able to knock down spot-up shots, he has a long way to go before he can even be labeled 3-and-D. Ultimately, Bilal is a raw prospect that is a part of the Wizards' long-term plans, and I think that he has enough promise to be the most intriguing young player on a roster that is filled with guys who are intriguing and young, in Deni Avdija, Johnny Davis, their lottery pick from last year, and even Corey Kispert, who I think is the most intriguing player to watch on the Wizards this season. Kispert has actually become the 3-and-D that Bilal will eventually get to. In his first 2 seasons, Kispert has shown an ability to knock down shots, hitting on nearly 40% of his threes on decent volume. And he's also great at using his size, standing at 6'7" to get to the rim and finish there. He's a good connector on offense who can make the extra pass, and I think that'll pop a lot when playing with guys like Kuzma, Poole, and Jones. Defensively, he can hold his own, and ultimately, that'll be the deciding factor for how much he can stay on the court. I really think Kispert can develop into an elite role player for the Wiz, and long term, I like his fit with the starting unit. The same can be said for Avdija, who has become somewhat of a Swiss Army knife player that can do a little bit of everything. He's not the world's best offensive player or scorer or shooter for that matter, but he's a good passer and connector, and you can see him being inserted in lineups alongside starters and even with bench units just to have another guy out there to make plays. Avdija's biggest strength is as a defender, using his frame and size to be a versatile tool on that end for Washington. And if he can ever expand his offensive game even a little bit, things could get interesting for the Wizards. Between Poole, Bilal, Kispert, and Avdija, the Wizards have some fun young talent that will make you want to tap in every night. And putting out an entertaining product should be the first thing on the docket for a team that is entering what is seemingly a long and winding rebuild. Washington's win total is projected at 24.5 for this season, the worst mark in the entire league, and honestly, I think they probably win less than that, especially with the way they are already shopping some of their rotation pieces. But the goal isn't to win games here in Washington, at least not for a few years. The goal this season should be to see what you got. See if Poole can turn into a star with the extra usage and open runway. See if Jones has the potential to be a full-time starting point guard in the league, and if he too can take a leap. See if Kispert, Avdia, Coulibaly can just progress and develop, and maybe get some surprise development from the likes of Gafford and Shamet. Regardless, I have a feeling Wizards fans are more excited than they have been for a while entering this season, because it's something new, something refreshing, something that might not be all that great right now, but has the potential to build into something great eventually. And that's all you can ask for. May the rebuild begin.